Hello, I'm Richard Levy. I'm Managing Director of Levy Consulting. And today I'm going to share with you some thoughts on Florida's planning and growth management system. I've had the opportunity to work in Florida's local government. I worked as a county planner and as managing a city planning function, as well as becoming a city administrator. So I've seen the growth management system both from an operational standpoint and from a leadership role inside a large local government. And today, I want to give you a sense of Florida's growth management and planning system. For those of you who are aspiring city and county managers, you're in a mid-level position in the organization, need to get a better grip on how the system works. So today we're going to talk about generally how the system is structured and how it works and how it functions within your organization. I want to start out by talking a little bit about why we plan. Clearly, planning develops a vision for your community. It helps establish community needs. It shapes and influences policies and directs the community's future. It also addresses some difficult political trade-offs that you often deal with in the day-to-day operations in your government. It amplifies and identifies community values. It provides really a guide for your citizens, your elected leadership, and your staff on how certain decisions should be made with regard to growth management and development. And it also gives greater certainty to everyone, the community, elected officials, developers, applicants, on what the future holds for your community and how growth management and planning decisions are made. Florida's planning system really evolves from Chapter 163, the Community Planning Act, and it does require that every local government in Florida have a comprehensive plan. We're going to talk about the comprehensive plan in greater detail in just a moment, but on your screen you can see a graphic showing Florida's coordinated planning system. It's a state, regional, local, top-down approach. Each level has certain responsibilities in the growth management system, starting with the state of Florida. In Chapter 163, the Community Planning Act, there's a state transportation plan, there's state water plans, and then you can see the agencies that are responsible for implementing growth management at the state level. You may very well be dealing with many of these agencies as your community makes certain growth management and planning decisions, and that really evolves from Chapter 163. Also in the statutes establishes Florida's regional planning level in Florida. There are various different functions. There's 10 regional planning councils, each with a regional policy plan. There's 5 water management districts, each having a water supply plan. There's 7 DOT districts in terms of managing the state's large roadway system that certainly affects your community. And then there are 27 what we call metropolitan planning organizations, or sometimes they're called TPOs, transportation planning organizations. These establish a regional long-range transportation plan. Not all of you in every city and county are in an MPO or a TPO, but I suspect many of you are, and you may very well be used to dealing with them as you seek funding from the state or federal government regarding transportation improvements. Then we get to the local government level, which is where you're at. There are 411 municipalities and 67 counties, depending on how you deal with Duval and Miami-Dade. They're little. Duval certainly is city-county government, but these comprehensive plans, as we talked about earlier, establish a vision. They must include principles and guidelines for the economic, social, and physical environment, as well as the fiscal development of every city and county. And it directs local government decision-making via what we call goals, objectives, policies, and standards. We're going to talk a little bit about those 4 levels of language that's in your comprehensive plan and what it really means to your organization. So here, in summary of Florida's planning system, growth management system, you can see the Community Planning Act in the statute, Chapter 163, at the top, and at the bottom with a straight line down to every local government is a local government comprehensive plan. As I said earlier, you are mandated to adopt and maintain a local government comprehensive plan, and you can see your relationships with the regional planning, policy plan, and all the other elements of Florida's planning system you can see in red. And then off to each side of the local government comprehensive plan, you can see the capital improvement element and the land development regulations. I know you know what those are, but we're going to talk about them and how they relate to the comprehensive plan to give you a complete context of how this entire system works. So let's talk about the comprehensive plan. It must be, when it's adopted and certainly when it's amended, based on supporting data and analysis. It's really important when plans are approved at the local government level. They are reviewed by the state of Florida, and everybody's looking for proper data and analysis to justify the decisions and policies in the plan. The plan is the basis for how a community regulates development, and almost equally as important, how you, as a member of a local government, either a city or a county, how you make decisions on how you invest in infrastructure and services. And really, when you think about it holistically, almost everything you do at a local government, approving capital improvement or delivering services, has a policy basis in the comprehensive plan. And local governments that really have their act together tie their delivery of services and their investments in infrastructure to their comprehensive plan. That's when you know you've got an organization that's got a solid policy framework. The statutes require certain components or elements of a comprehensive plan, and you can see them on the left. You're probably most used to seeing future land use, and we'll talk about amendments to the plan, but you can see the list of all of the obligatory elements of the plan. The one at the bottom on the right, on the left, is property rights in red. That's the most recent addition to the statute, requiring all local government cities and counties to adopt a property rights element. That was about 3 or 4 years ago. The state mandated that. Florida's a very heavy property rights state. And on the right, you can see optional elements that communities are allowed to adopt as part of their comprehensive plan, and you can see the entire list. And maybe many of you have certain elements in your comprehensive plan, and depending on your community. You may be a relatively new city with just more suburban development. Maybe there's not a lot of redevelopment and you don't need a redevelopment element. But those of you on the coastal area, while there's coastal management requirements, mandatory element on the left, you might have a hazard mitigation component or element in your plan. So that's how the statute lays out what you're required to do and what you're allowed to do in addition to the basic requirements. Now, I talked earlier about goals, objectives, policies, and standards, and you can see that how the plan is built. We talked about data being very important. So there's data gathering, developing a community vision that's done through extensive public participation. And so planners will always be heavily involved in outreach to the community, making sure there's full participation by all elements of the community, ultimately developing the goals and objectives, policies and standards that your elected body will adopt. And then the plan is implemented, and we're going to talk about in just a moment how the plan is implemented. One of the things that the statutes require is establishing of a local planning agency. This local planning agency is the body that is responsible for reviewing your plan and making sure all amendments are consistent with the plan. Any amendments that are going forward to the elected body have to go through the local planning agency. It is established by in your either city code, county code, or other designation formally. The local planning agency is required to include a representative of the school district, which is appointed by your school board, although they are a non-voting member. Now, the local planning agency can be a number of entities. There's some choices. Your elected county commission or city council could designate itself as the local planning agency, or very often, and I see most of this around the state, it's usually the planning commission or planning and zoning board, and very rarely in very small communities, it can often be just the planning department. There's choices in how the local planning agency is established, but you must have one. And so I assure you, if you haven't asked or you don't know, somewhere in your organization there's an establishment of what entity is the local planning agency. Now, comprehensive plans are plans usually for 20 years and sometimes longer. And it's oftentimes the world changes, right? Things happen, conditions change. We go through an economic downturn. We go through an economic expansion. There's reasons for amending the comprehensive plan. Maybe the assumptions and the data that was in the original plan has changed and needs to be revised. And therefore, there's opportunities under the statute to amend the comprehensive plan. There's 3 processes that you can avail yourself to, and applicants, property owners, developers can also avail them of these processes. It depends on the nature of the application. There's 3 of them. The expedited state review process are those that are required to go to the state, but they're not of a scale or intricacy that involve the next one, which is the state coordinated review, which is really the most extensive review that the state will conduct on a comprehensive plan amendment. The amendment is sent from your local government. It's transmitted at a transmittal hearing by your elected body to the state. The state then disseminates it to various departments. You get comments back, and it comes back to you with recommendations or comments on your proposed amendment. Those are usually very large scale, very sophisticated, large scale projects, often hundreds, if not thousands of acres, if you're in a community that has that kind of development land inventory available for changes. And finally, what you're probably seeing most of the time are small scale amendments. They're less than 50 acres. They're only a future land use map amendment. You can't amend the text of your comprehensive plan. It only requires 1 hearing before the local government adopting board, your county commission or city council, and does not require transmittal to the state. The comprehensive plan is required under Florida statute to be updated. And I have this EKG graphic on the screen to show that it's really taking the health of your comprehensive plan, and it's done through what we call an evaluation appraisal report. And that is required by statute. You must do this once every 7 years. And if you go on the state website, and I have that website at the back of this presentation for your benefit, you can actually find the date that every city and county is obligated to deliver their evaluation and appraisal report. And the evaluation and appraisal report is really a health checkup of your plan. How well is your plan performed? Has it met the expectations? Has the population that was originally projected 7 or more years ago, oftentimes it's more than 7, but 7 or more years ago, have you grown faster? Have you grown slower? And this report will recommend things that you need to do to bring the plan into compliance. Oftentimes, we know at the local government level, we have state mandates that we often don't like, and they cause us to have to change certain things. And the evaluation and appraisal report is an opportunity for you to look at your plan and compare it to what has changed in the last 7 years, and allows you to provide for changes to your plan and recommended amendments to your plan. Now, the plan, that's the evaluation process. Your plan's updated, but let's talk about how your plan works sort of on an everyday basis. So we know we've established goals, objectives, policies, and standards, but you don't deal with your comprehensive plan, certainly in public hearings, every day. What you do deal with in cities and counties every day is your development review process. And this is where everything from building permitting to subdivision plats to all the things, new development, redevelopment that come through your system is all managed through your development review process. And the statutes require that you must have land development regulations that must implement the comprehensive plan, and it must be done consistent with your comprehensive plan. And your land development regulations have to address how you're going to use land and water, how you're going to subdivide land, how you're going to protect well fields, how you're going to address flooding, how you're going to protect environmentally sensitive lands, how you're going to provide public facilities and services, and how you're going to manage safe and convenient traffic flow all embodied in your land development regulations. What's important here, and this is really important language and I'm going to read it because I think I want to reinforce it. No public or private development. That means nothing the city does or any private development can do can be permitted except in conformance with the comprehensive plan or elements. Okay, we know that. And no land development regulations shall be inconsistent with the adopted comprehensive plan. You have to make sure that your comprehensive plan up here drives decisions for your land development regulations such that the decisions you're making every day are consistent with your plan. If you have something in your land development regulations that's inconsistent with your comprehensive plan, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to wind up making decisions on an everyday basis that violate your comprehensive plan. So this is a really important principle to keep in mind. Now, these land development regulations, all of you have some version of this somewhere. Some communities do what's called a unified land development code. They put them all in one place, but that's not necessary, depending on the history and culture of your organization. But they do include zoning, subdivision regulations, standards for site design, what facilities you're going to require for approvals. In the environmental regulations at the local level, we know that there are water management district and DEP and other state environmental regulations, but you have some at the local level. How the process and administration of your land development regulations will occur, how you're going to interpret certain exceptions, how you're going to enforce your code, and of course definitions. So somewhere in your land development regulations, all of these pieces exist. And I'm going to focus on a couple of these, but this might be rudimentary for some of you, but we have zoning regulations and the zoning ordinance, or if you do it by resolution at a county, really identifies how property in a specific area can be used. They typically regulate the size of the lot, where you put structures, the density and height and other elements of developing a particular site. They vary from community. But really the history of zoning really goes back to trying to separate incompatible uses. In the early 19 teens and 1920s, when zoning was first really becoming a thing in the 20th century in the US, it was about separating the industrial meat rendering plants separate from the single-family homes, and zoning has just evolved from that. And so that's a little bit of the history. But all of you have zoning regulations. All of you have subdivision regulations, and you must comply with the Florida statutes, and certainly your engineer or your public works director understands this, and your process for approving subdivision plats, I suspect, is fairly well established, but it's probably be a good thing as you're learning about more details of the growth management system for you aspiring managers to learn about your zoning code and your subdivision regulations. And then the land development process ultimately results in the everyday permitting of new development. And when we say permitting, we're issuing permits for everything. It might be a fence, it might be addition to a home, it could be new buildings, it could be redevelopment. But I want to show this land development process because, again, it starts at the top with the comprehensive plan. This is Florida's unique growth management system. Your land development code evolves from your comprehensive plan, must be consistent. It establishes through zoning the land use intensity. There's a site review process somewhere in your organization. You might do it administratively with the staff. Some of it may make its way to your planning and zoning commission and ultimately to your elected body. But there's site plans, development agreements. All of these things are part of your development review process. And ultimately at the bottom, you're issuing permits for construction. And construction simply, I'm going to separate them into kind of two simple groups, and I'm oversimplifying this, but there's horizontal construction where the site infrastructure, utilities, drainage, roads, that's the horizontal infrastructure, all come through this system. And then the vertical construction is the construction of buildings on top of that. And you can see on the left, There are several entities that advise this land development process. You certainly have your internal departments at the city and county. You can see the FDOT, Water Management District, School District. Sometimes it may be an adjoining jurisdiction. You may have agreements with adjoining counties or cities. This varies between different organizations, but you can see this is a very collaborative, comprehensive process for ultimately issuing development permits. The development review process has different levels of decision making. There's certain ministerial decisions, which mean they're administrative, that don't have to go to an advisory board or an elected body. It might be site plan review, it might be infrastructure permits, certainly building permits. Our systems are not designed to have our elected bodies make decisions on building permits. We would never get anything done in local government, so we create the system where there's certain decisions that are ministerial. We have certain legislative decisions which can only be made by the elected body. Those are comprehensive plan amendments, amending your land development code, and sometimes you have certain permits that are called conditional use permits. It's a special kind of land use approval, but those decisions are legislative, and only the city or county commission has the authority to grant that approval. I put on here a slide showing the school board, the generalized residential development process, because as we know in Florida, school capacity is a really important issue in almost every community. You may be in a retirement community where school capacity is not that big of an issue, but in most communities it is. And there is a requirement in the statute that each local government has to enter into an interlocal agreement with its school board to adopt a process by which school capacity is integrated into the city or county decision-making process on granting of development approvals. It's done differently in different places in different counties. I urge you, if you don't know anything about it, this would be a good thing to kind of explore, to learn more about the nature of your organization, the nature of how you interact and collaborate with the local school board, to learn how the school board decision-making process on school capacity and where new schools go and how they make their decisions is related to your county or city's decision on land development or other development approvals. So let's talk about what some of the tools that you have to implement your comprehensive plan. We want to talk about the fiscal impact tools. These are decisions that you make, and we're not going to go into a lot of detail here because we could spend a whole other module talking about community redevelopment agencies and impact fees, development agreements, community development districts, and capital improvement programs. All of these programs and entities play an important role in implementing your comprehensive plan. All of the decisions that are driven from these entities or these programs have to be consistent with your comprehensive plan. So I'm getting close to the end. I want to talk a little bit about best practices in city planning, because if you're not a planner that's become a manager or haven't come out of the development review process, you're going to hear from your planners some of the things that are hot in sort of planning and development, and there's some on the right-hand side, traditional neighborhood design, which you can see some graphics here. It's kind of going back to when the automobile wasn't the driver of all of our decisions, and so neighborhood layout is very much more walkable. Placemaking, the 15-minute city, everything you need to live in a city or in a community is within a 15-minute walk or drive. 5-minute pedestrian shed, that is, parks and other community civic facilities should be within a 5-minute walk, which is about a quarter of a mile. Form-based codes, that's codes that sort of drive decisions on, rather than zoning and separating of uses, it's more concerned with the form of the building as opposed to the actual use. It tries to integrate mixed use a little bit more. Context-based street design, making sure your streets are designed to match what's going on around them, and ultimately transit-oriented development if you have a transit system in your community. These are things that you might hear from your planners or you might hear talked about in the community. So I want to thank you for taking the time to spend with me today and letting me share with you sort of a very high level of what Florida's growth management system does and how it really affects your organization to make sure that you have a good rudimentary understanding of how the system works. And then if you have an appetite for much more information on any one of these subjects, I've provided you a list of additional resources and websites here that you can pursue on your own to do a deeper dive on any of the topics we've talked about today. Thank you.